Thank you, Rico. This was a good intro. What I like us to do step by step. Imagine there is this big building, and we want to take our audience step by step to the top of this tower.
Sure.
What are the first steps we need to be taking as we get to this top of the tower, that is the information security? So what are the first steps, foundational concept we need to know? So we talked about cyber and the cyber world. Well, when we start clicking on that term, we see terms like network, internet, a company's information system, applications that runs, data that runs through the application. So as a foundational concept for us to learn, to make sure we understand, what is it we need to understand? Is it the network layers? Is it understanding what are what's the components of internet? Sometimes I hear people say, what's the difference between network and internet, even though they are related.
Okay.
So let demystify some of those concepts.
Sure. So to further answer that, again, this is gonna be very topical, but like to answer that question, I'm gonna need to know your line of business. So let's just take any line of business whatsoever. Let's take a doctor's office, okay? Because right now that's a big ticket in information security. A lot of ransomware is hidden there. So the first thing you look at is to say, okay, where are you in regards to your threat management, your vulnerability, and where are you currently in your, let's just go down to the minimum workstation, okay? Where is it at? What type of services are you running? What type of suite are you running? Are you running Office 365? Are you running Google? A lot of doctors' offices are now going to Google Workstation. So, and from there, you have to say, okay, the user aspect, where is that going and how is that translation to our network aspect? So these things kind of have to go hand in hand, okay? Because in order for you to be the user, you have to go to the networks and then reach out to the internet and whatnot, okay? And that's how it's going to share information, send payments and customer information, medical charts, stuff like that.
Exactly. So this is very good. So let's say, think about the doctor's office. The information in the medical chart is an example of our data, right? Information about the patients is the data. So when we think about data layer, is those data, right? So we can use that as our examples, the data in those medical charts. Now, the participant in this activity is the staff at the doctor's office, or could be the patient who go online, maybe on the website, or they have a patient portal, and they go in and log in, and they look at their lab result, or they send question to the doctor. So that's good. That is what I really appreciate, setting up that business concept, that line of business, so that when we talk about examples, real world examples of when we say data or network, what do we mean? So that you mentioned let's say Chrome workstations, or the iPhones that people use to go to the patient portal. So these are the devices that need to be connected, and they share data. So this is very good, but this information security in all of these are important.
Right. So if we look at a device, you want to allow them into your domain, if you, or better yet, you want to allow them to the WAN or the LAN. However you have your network segmented, kind of depends on what you're going to allow. So that at that point you're starting to look at an MDM, a mobile device manager, or device management system,
I see.
Which is usually done by a system admin saying, if they are a part of the domain, then they have allowed access to X, Y, and Z based on a role-based security of whoever the user is. So if user Mr. Water Bottle is a default security group, and that'll allow him to 3 folders, and whenever you join his computer to the domain and he's allowed to log in, he's only going to have access to those 3 folders. And that's how you kind of want to architect it.
Very good. So that's very good. So you told us about a user having access to an application and predefined set of data, predefined folders. And there may be other folders, other data, but have we architected that this user can only have access to these?
Absolutely. So you want to architect that usually on the server side, through your GPO, through your GPO policies and whatnot. And at that point you'll determine, based on the role-based security and what group they belong to, what they have access to and what they're allowed to do. So if they have read-write privileges, they can read and write. But if they only have read on folder 1, that means they can only read the document. They can't cut it, they can't make copies to it, they just can only read it.
Got it. That's very good. So when we think about this is good. We talked about the business office, the devices they use, the so-called endpoint, the computers, the devices, and then the applications that run it, the data that runs through it. Then what happens after that? Let's think about these devices are on the network. So we are talking about data, user, application, and workstation, the computer that connects to the network. What happens after that?
So I think you kind of have to backtrack a little bit more from that. So let's say you have 500 users and you have an endpoint on each one of them. Those are going to be monitored. So the endpoint is just going to see the threats come in, see what's going to go on, see what you set up in the policy and procedures basis. So if you don't want anything leaving the network with a social security number or a birth date, that's what will kind of stop that as well. And then those are based on policies that you create, and usually a bigger box endpoint such as like McAfee or Ghost or anything like that will help you configure those to the best of your knowledge of your business. Okay, so from there, you're also going to need some sort of auditing tool, such as let's just throw something to monitor the Active Directory, see what's going on, how many passwords resets, and at that point, that will give you the inclination of saying, hey, this is a bit too much, too many passwords are being reset this time. You might want to look at that based on your behavior, the signature behavior. Okay, and then on top of that, the endpoint's good. You have your Active Directory. Then what's your threat? What's your threat monitoring? Something like, I don't know, Ghost or Alert Logic or something of that matter, right? And that'll tell you what's going on in your virtual environment or your cloud environment. Let's say you have one at Amazon and you have somebody who's trying to has multiple RDP sessions, and they're trying to say, hey, these sessions are open to the world, and they're trying to be logged in from Singapore. So at that point, what means are they using? Are they using PuTTY? Are they using SSH? What type of session are they establishing? So from there, you have to look at those signatures and determine, okay, is this maliciousware? Is this just leaving our network and coming back through our network? So you have to understand what your network architecture looks like, what your business model looks like, and marry those as well.
Okay, very good. So as we started, you mentioned information security is based on your information policy. And your information policy, which is the do's and don'ts, what we allow, what we don't allow, what we encourage, what we don't encourage. That needs to be built into our systems, in our application, in our network, not just written in some paper or Word document.
Right.
So the information security professional comes in, help the business, let's say that doctor office, define their information policy based on the patient data, the staff they have, and their business objective. Once they define that, then it's a matter of where they implement it, right? Either at the application layer, or as you mentioned, some of these tools that looks for it at the device level or the traffic on the internet. So then it becomes where you configure it, as you mentioned. You use tools to configure the information policy. And but all of this goes back to that architecture you mentioned, right?
Right.
So be aware of it. Very good. So this is good.
So in regards to the policy, right, what we notice is that a lot of companies, they will say, hey, it's very gray, and that's good if you're a small business and you want to play in the area of the big businesses, and that's okay, because you can technically say, yes, I monitor network security, and if you don't put a means by it, then that's fine, because the less you answer these questions with more information, the more the auditor or your soon-to-be business vendor is going to ask more questions. So it's okay, but we're starting to see a lot of these, like healthcare companies, mechanic shops, they actually have some real deep down questions like, hey, tell us how you monitor threat management, or tell us how you monitor your vulnerability management, and how do you do that? How many times a week do you do that? Stuff like that. We're starting to see this big trend. They're starting to get a lot smarter now. So
very good. Thank you very much.
of course.